Hi everyone, and welcome to Lifting the Lamp. I'm Frater Eleftheria, and this video is going to be my reaction to a post that a person called Matthew Brown did on X just over a week ago. Very interesting post, very weird, and it involved me or my work. So this is going to be one of the more unusual videos that I've done. One of the more way out videos that I've done. And, you know, I cover a lot of very weird topics on this channel. You know, Western esotericism, magic, but this possibly takes the cake. So if you don't know who Matthew Brown is, he is a UFO or UAP whistleblower who originally worked in the Pentagon. Who blew the whistle on a covert project for UAPs, known as Immaculate Constellation. And he's recently made waves in the disclosure community because he made a post on X talking about a lot of really cryptic topics, in which he used a screenshot from one of my videos in that post. And people have been trying to figure out what it means. They've been asking AI what it means. AI doesn't have any idea what it's talking about, which comes as no surprise to me. Anyway, I'm here to explain what the things from my videos that Matthew Brown posted are referring to, some of the other more esoteric topics that he hints at in that post, explaining those, and trying to use my knowledge and my kind of powers of reasoning and deduction to figure out what he's trying to say in that mysterious post, how it relates to the UAP phenomenon, but also relates to spiritual or religious issues, and esoteric religion in particular, and a range of other things and how that all fits together. So that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. Buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride. A lot of information about a lot of things. It's probably going to be a long video. A lot of real mind-blowing pieces of information that we can be led to by following the little breadcrumbs in Matthew Brown's X post to their logical conclusions. So Matthew Brown blew the whistle on his role in Immaculate Constellation relatively recently in the history of the disclosure movement. He was interviewed by Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp on their Weaponized podcast, and he wrote a report about this secret project monitoring different types of UAP phenomena. And so Matthew Brown gave this public information, and then some other things happened in the world. Elon Musk was in the White House with Donald Trump, overseeing his newly formed Department of Government Efficiency. He finished his tenure doing that, so to speak, and then there was kind of what you might describe as a messy breakup between Elon Musk and Donald Trump that was very public, and Matthew Brown took advantage of the publicity around that and weighed in on that by making this X post about, hey Elon Musk, if you're at odds with the White House now and they haven't let you in on their sort of AI stuff, here's something even better, and drops a whole lot of hints to do with the UAP phenomenon and things like that. They go even deeper at a spiritual level, including some occult stuff from this channel. So that happened, and then meanwhile, I'm totally unawares about any of this. On the 6th of June, I look at my YouTube analytics, as I always do on a daily basis, and I notice a massive, massive spike in my views and my subscribers. And people have left comments on my videos saying Matthew Brown sent me here. I noticed that my video revealing hidden secrets of the Sigillum Dei Aemeth has got an unusually high number of views, which is unusual because it's so niche. And anyway, eventually this post came to my attention. And there were people trying to analyze what everything means in the post. So I felt that I needed to weigh in on the meaning of Matthew Brown's enigmatic post. And who am I? I'm a content creator who teaches people about the Western esoteric tradition, of, very knowledgeable on a number of practices in that tradition. I've had a lot of personal experiences, altered states of consciousness, encounters with various types of entities. So, that's kind of what I specialize in, so to speak. And one area that I'm particularly attentive to on this channel is to talk about Enochian magic. And I'll explain what that is in a moment. I was planning on reading the post to you before getting started on this video and analyzing everything, but the video will be too long if I do that. So I'll try and link it in the description below. You can go back and look at the post yourself to get an idea of what I'm talking about. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of pick out those bits of the post which refer to an esoteric topic. I'm going to break down what that's referring to, and then I'm going to arrange the information in a way that makes some sort of sense in a chronology of sorts. Space and time don't matter too much to the UAP beings themselves, but for us it helps to have things put in a linear kind of fashion from beginning to end. So that's what I'm going to do. That's the way I'm going to organize the information. So the first thing I wanted to comment on was the username of Matthew Brown on X, which is Son of Abramelin. And this is the first hint at something occult, because the Book of Abramelin is one of the main kind of magical texts from the Western esoteric tradition. Describes a ritual of contacting one's higher self in a manner of speaking, but it's actually more complicated than that. A being known as the Holy Guardian Angel. And this is what Matthew Brown's referring to in his Twitter name. So a very niche topic, already kind of hinting that he must be interested in topics that are pretty unknown to most people. And he hints at that in his interview with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp as well. He's always had an interest in these sorts of topics. That would explain why he's found a niche channel such as mine. I'm a spiritual content creator, a esoteric content creator, but I'm not like a famous person in that field. Like I haven't appeared on an episode of Midnight Gospel or anything like that. So he must have had to delve quite deeply into these topics to be able to find me, and to have a username like Son of Abramelin. All right, so the first thing that Matthew Brown mentions that I want to dig into is the star Sirius. He says that getting to Mars will require a serious amount of energy, sort of a play on words. So he's talking about traveling through space, and he's talking about the star Sirius. What's the connection between this and the UAP phenomenon? And is there any connection to the occult? So the Sirius connection, when we're talking about the history of UAP encounters and how they intersect with religion, goes all the way back to recorded history, and even further back than that, several thousand years. There's a tribe in Africa known as the Dogon tribe, who follow a bunch of spiritual entities known as the Nommo, who they credit with giving them knowledge of various sorts, including spiritual knowledge, and descending down from the skies and initiating the first of the sort of magicians in that society. And apparently the Nommo was said to have come from the star Sirius, and they had understandings of the Sirius star system that they shouldn't have had, because they didn't have astronomical technology to be able to see this star system in great detail. but they had that knowledge. That's a bit historically disputed, but it's certainly one possibility of this culture. So, nevertheless, there's this connection between these beings from Sirius. And of course, one of the major kind of extraterrestrial species that is described in modern kind of UFO lore is the Sirians. And so there's a connection there. But the celestial beings from Sirius actually feature in a lot of different religions. Sirius has an important role in ancient Egyptian religion. There's various cultures that say there are high-ranking celestial beings that reside in the star Sirius, from which they govern the cosmos. And that's where the secret chiefs are said to reside. It's one of the fixed stars in medieval astrology, one of the highest spiritual influences in the universe. So a modern day occultist who has spoken about Sirius as well is a individual by the name of Robert Anton Wilson. He claims to have had a Sirius contact when he was age 23, a telepathic communication with beings from Sirius, or associated with Sirius. And for him, the key aspect of the contact is not being taken up into a spaceship or anything. It's the telepathic communication across vast distances of space. That is the way that the contact takes place. And for Robert Anton Wilson, these beings have been contacting us for many thousands of years, and he actually credits the beginning of the mystery traditions of, different secret societies throughout history passing down esoteric knowledge, the sort of invisible college, you might say. He attributes the start of that among the human race to a Sirius contact, much the same as the Dogon tribe do. And it's hard to find on the internet now, but you used to be able to find the flow chart of the Illuminati, as Robert Anton Wilson calls them, not to be confused with the sense in which the Illuminati is meant today as like a control system. But these secret societies passing down esoteric knowledge, the Sirius contact is really where that began, and then it sort of goes down to Egypt and Babylon, and then makes its way through all the other esoteric schools throughout history, down to the present day. So that was Robert Anton Wilson's theory. He had a lot of other interesting views on the Sirius contact and these beings that are known today as extraterrestrials, although, as I will go into, that's not really the best representation of them. He says they're not like the stereotypical space alien. They can take on different forms depending on the cultural filter of a people at any given time. They appear as space aliens in this day and age, but in ages past they might appear as fairies or something of that nature. So they can adopt different forms in order to make it easier to communicate with us. But they are really something much more trans-dimensional or extra-dimensional in nature. There is also a documentary by Dr. Stephen Greer called Sirius, which is all about the CE5 protocols, human-initiated contact with UAPs through telepathic communication. So that's another potential connection that this reference to Sirius is pointing to. The next thing I want to talk about is Matthew Brown's reference to special project hangars owned by Amentum Corp. So this is kind of implying that this corporation, Amentum Corp, which is a real corporation, has access to alien technology and maybe cooperates with the government on certain programs. But there's other companies that Matthew Brown could have mentioned. He could have mentioned Lockheed Martin, for example, who are in a similar situation, allegedly, according to other UFO or UAP whistleblowers. Why Amentum? Why pick this particular corporation? I think it has to do with the name and the choice of name for this particular company. Amentum is clearly a derivative of the Egyptian word amenti, and this is a reference to the Egyptian afterlife. For the Egyptians, the afterlife was this whole other realm of existence with various kinds of cosmic entities within it that the human soul passed through when it passed from this life. And there were said to have been Egyptian magicians who could travel out of their bodies into this realm. And the Egyptian Book of the Dead is all about spells and invocations for the departed soul to be able to navigate through this realm of Amenti. And so, so there's a connection there. There was said to be a gateway to Amenti, which is the setting sun. And if you look at the logo of Amentum Corp, it very much looks like an overlay of the setting sun at different stages. So some reference to a gateway to another dimension. And these are the people that are involved in UAP activities. So, it's kind of suggesting that there's a connection between those two concepts. The next reference from Matthew Brown's post that I'm going to talk about, which caused the biggest stir, is the reference to Enochian magic. This is the name aborymon that was referred to, as well as that odd circular symbol with the numbers and letters around it. Both of those things come from this channel. And I'll link the original videos in the description below that relate to that, along with some other interesting bits of information related to what I'm discussing here tonight. So at this point, I'm going to take a big step back and I'm going to explain what Enochian magic is, so I can then explain the significance of that symbol and the name aborymon. So, within the kind of esoteric occult underbelly of Western spirituality, there's a range of different types of practices, including ceremonial magic, there's various forms. People are most familiar with kind of the casting of spells and things like that. But there's another type of Western ceremonial magic which is about communicating with higher intelligences, namely angels. And perhaps arguably the most well-known form of magic that tries to achieve that is this form of magic known as Enochian magic. Enochian magic was developed in the Elizabethan era and is credited to largely to an individual known as John Dee. An interesting character in his own right for reasons I'll get into. But basically, John Dee tried to contact angels through a method called scrying, where you sort of look into a seeing stone and sort of see things spiritually in a non-localized way. Crystal ball gazing is kind of like the stereotype of this, but it's actually more complicated than that, but that's a helpful visual for you. He used scrying, claimed to have contacted angels, and the angels gave him communications and downloads where they gave him information for a magical system which would allow him to deepen his contact with them. And this would later on become known as Enochian magic. Now, there's a lot of debate about whether John Dee came up with the system himself based on previous forms of Western ceremonial magic and just attributed it to the angels, or whether it's the real deal and he got a full-on information download from the angels and that gave us Enochian magic. I think it's a combination of the two, and having done Enochian magic myself and had divine revelation through that method, it's really like a collaboration. It's like a conversation between you and the being, like Moses on Mount Sinai was actually, the revelation at Sinai was more the way of a dialogue rather than a one-way information download. So, the information would have been shared from the angels to Dee, would have inspired Dee, and he would have, filtered that through his own kind of analytical frame of reference, being knowledgeable on forms of Western ceremonial magic, and kind of interpreted that information in that way and produced the magical system that way. That's my theory. And so you've got this influence of the angels on Dee to create his system through his scryer Edward Kelly as well, who was helping him. But there's other influences upon Dee that make their way into the system. And ultimately, those influences, if you trace them back to antiquity, they come from Gnostic Christianity and they come from Jewish Merkava mysticism. So these two kinds of monotheistic forms of mysticism, which are all about sending the soul into the heavens to communicate with angels, in what would today be termed kind of astral projection techniques. You had the ancient Greek theurgy, which is doing the same thing, but all of these kind of different traditions ultimately go back to ancient Egypt and Babylon. But there's a long history going back hundreds or thousands of years of this kind of spirit communication before John Dee comes on the scene. So what information did the angels give to Dee to be included in this Enochian magical system exactly? They gave Dee a series of instructions for building magical tools, for invocations to be read, to summon angels, and a number of different tables that had different information that you could kind of decode different angelic names from. And all of this kind of formed the Enochian magical system. And one of the most important tools in that system is a kind of like a wax disc or seal known as the Sigillum Dei Aemeth, which looks like this. And basically what it is, it's kind of like a mini sacred space, you could say. There's 5 of these sigillums that get used in Enochian magic. 4 small ones which go under the legs of the table, which the crystal ball is mounted on, and another bigger one which goes in between the table and the crystal ball that is mounted upon it. So that the crystal ball is mounted on the sigillum is placed on the table. And it's got a number of figures around it and names around it to kind of establish the purpose of the scrying is to contact certain types of angelic intelligences. And the purpose of the scrying sessions that were set up using the sigillum was to communicate with angels to receive divine wisdom, basically. And so that video that I did with the circular symbol was part of the Sigillum Dei Aemeth. It was sort of the outer rim or circumference of the Sigillum Dei Aemeth, because it's a very layered symbol, and the outermost layer has got its own specific meaning, and that's what I was sort of doing a deep dive into in that video. And what you see in this circumference is a number of letters and numbers, and it's actually an encryption. And if you decrypt the information in that circumference, it gives you a total of 8 names of very high-ranking angelic beings. And one of the 8 is aborymon, and that is that word that appears in Matthew Brown's post. And I'll talk more about aborymon in just a moment. But first, you might be wondering, why encrypt this information? Well, that's because John Dee, who's sort of the intellect who through which these angelic communications were filtered, was actually a master cryptographer. A very unusual skill set, but the reason why he had it is because he was a spy. He was part of the British intelligence apparatus, such as it existed in those days. He was an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. Actually, her court astrologer, was involved in all kinds of intrigue, diplomatic sort of missions and things like that on behalf of the crown, and also happened to be trying to contact these higher intelligences through magic. And he used to sign his name 007. So he's the original inspiration for Ian Fleming, or one of the inspirations for Ian Fleming's character by the same name. So, you know, very important figure in the spying world as well as the occult world. So it's I think it's very significant for that reason that Matthew Brown has chosen to point to Dee, among other reasons, to show that there's a history of intelligence agents trying to contact higher beings for whatever purpose, for higher knowledge, or perhaps for some other motive for furthering the interests of their particular government. Right, so back to aborymon. Aborymon is one of these 8 names. However, the name aborymon is more mysterious than the other 7, because the technique for discovering the other 7 was quite discernible. Aborymon, in contrast, seems to have been not explicitly mentioned in Dee's journals anywhere, and the technique for decrypting the name seems to have been lost by a combination of Michael, that's the Archangel Michael, communicating with Dee and changing the meanings of one of the letters in the circumference, and then also a incorrect transcription of the letters and numbers in a subsequent version of Dee's material. So it became impossible to even know for hundreds of years that the name aborymon even existed. And then through the scholarship of an individual called Aaron Leach, who's in the Golden Dawn, does a lot of excellent work on Enochian magic, he was able to restore the original letters and numbers of the sigillum. And I read his research. I decided to try and then decipher what the name was. I came up with aborymon as the name. Aaron Leach independently came up with aborymon as the missing name. And so we were the only 2 people who did that, and who really understood the significance of aborymon for a long time. So who or what is aborymon? In short, aborymon represents the forces of chaos and disorder, but under the control of God, and unleashed for a very specific purpose at the end of the age, in order to renovate the world, basically to sweep away wickedness in the world and prepare the way for the coming of the New Jerusalem. So it's very intriguing that of all the Enochian entities that Matthew Brown could have referred to, he chose to refer to aborymon, because that's got very apocalyptic overtones to it. Another interesting part of Matthew Brown's post that I'll talk about next, where he's sort of goading Elon Musk into looking into UAP technology, essentially, is the gist of it. He makes a statement which is quite curious, which is that rockets feel so 1947 to me. Don't they to you? Very mysterious statement, but I know what it means. It has to do with a series of events that connect the year 1947, rocketry, the occult, and the UAP phenomenon. And that is the occult activities of a man called Jack Parsons. So, American rocketry, as we know it today, which laid the groundwork for the US to land on the moon, send rockets into space, and indeed, which laid the groundwork for Elon Musk and the sort of stuff that he's doing today, all comes from a maverick scientist by the name of Jack Parsons. And there was a great sort of series about the life of Parsons called Strange Angel, which I would highly recommend watching. But there were things that were unusual about Jack Parsons, chief of which was that he was an occultist. He was a member of the Ordo Templi Orientis. He was actually the master of the Agape Lodge for a time in California. And Parsons saw no contradiction between his scientific endeavours and his more intellectual endeavours and his mystical studies of the occult, much the same as John Dee, who was the classic Renaissance man. And so one of the occult things that Jack Parsons did was a ritual known as the Babylon working, where he was, it's kind of hard to explain, but essentially he was trying to help usher in a new aeon, the end of the old established order and the ushering in of something new that would ultimately be more liberating for the human race. And he incorporated Enochian invocations into his Babylon working. One of the Enochian calls formed part of the ritual. And as part of the Babylon working, Jack Parsons went out into the Mojave Desert with none other than L. Ron Hubbard, or Frater H., who at one time was a close associate of Jack Parsons and also a magician. And the two of them were doing this Babylon working together. In the Mojave Desert, Frater H., L. Ron Hubbard, reports that when they had done the invocation, it tore a hole in the fabric of time and space. 1947 is the year when the flying saucer phenomenon really started to take off in the United States, including the Roswell crash. And interestingly, the Mojave Desert, where Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard did the Babylon working, is where Area 51 now resides. So many people say that they really did open up a portal to another dimension. That's where the UAPs come from, and they essentially blame Jack Parsons for the whole UAP phenomenon in the first place. But there are other authorities who say that it's because we started using nukes around then, that's why these beings started to take more of an interest in us. I think it's probably the latter, but there could be a magical connection between the coming of the UAPs and Jack Parsons' Enochian invocations as well. And then the other thing that Matthew Brown says, which is quite intriguing, is he talks about the tracking of non-structured light energy craft. By talking about this specific type of UAP, Matt Brown seems to be hinting at a theory of at least certain UAP phenomena, that they're not actually anything to do with technology or metallic discs at all. It's actually something that is a more spiritual manifestation, a kind of a being that inhabits a more spiritual dimension of existence. And these tend to manifest as structured light type of things that are flying around. So if you look into some of the stuff that David Grush talks about, who is another person involved in UFO disclosure, was at a congressional hearing, gave his testimony there, discussing many of the same things that Matthew Brown himself knows about, as Brown said himself in his interview on Weaponized. Grush talks about how some of these UAPs appear to be extra-dimensional rather than extraterrestrial. And he points to the fact that many of the sort of bodies that have been recovered from these things look humanoid, which is suspect because according to the laws of evolution, life from another world shouldn't look anything like us, but it does, which suggests that these things are either us from the future or they are simply assuming a form that will be kind of easy for us to communicate with. Or it could be a combination of both. And then other things about the way these UAPs behave suggests that they're existing on another dimension beyond this one. And Grush says many of the same things that Robert Anton Wilson theorized that I talked about earlier, that these extra-dimensional beings can take lots of different forms. They can appear sometimes as fairies or angels, or in modern times as aliens. But it's sort of the same thing quite often that is behind these phenomena, and it's these extra-dimensional intelligences. And Grush theorizes based on this that the UAPs may very well be the phenomenon that is behind religious experiences, when people experience visions of angels and things like that. And concepts in religion and spirituality of like a light body, we can step into a spiritual body of light and travel around the spiritual dimensions, shows that human beings have a capacity to interact on this dimension as well. So at this point, I'd like to talk about the work of another person known as Daniel Rection. This is somebody who is kind of an esotericist of sorts, but he comes at esotericism and spirituality from the UAP angle, and it's very interesting to see how his experiences and his research has sort of found connections between those two things. So Daniel Rection has been able to demonstrate that a lot of government research into UAPs was not about the retrieval of wreckage at all, but was actually based in remote viewing activities, using telepathy, using astral projection to communicate with something through time and space. And he's also pointed out that many reported alien abductions come about through a specific type of hypnosis, and so they're linked to the spiritual experience and altered states of consciousness. He's also been able to demonstrate through the work of Jacques Vallée how UAP events and encounters are very dreamlike and surreal and sort of have this sort of high strangeness surrounding them, which suggests altered states of consciousness associated with the encounters. So he's done all of this and demonstrated that encountering these UAPs is a kind of a religious experience and overlaps with the spiritual experience in that respect. And he points out that some of the techniques for telepathically contacting the UAPs are similar to medieval scrying, and he singles out one technique in particular, which is the CE5 protocols of Dr. Stephen Greer, which I mentioned earlier in the video. And Rection talks about how when he did his own CE5 experiment, he actually communicated with a spirit who told him about John Dee and Edward Kelly. So we're starting to come full circle now, circling back around from the modern UAP phenomenon to a direct connection through practice and experience of modern Enochian practitioners back to Enochian magic, a connection between the UAPs and the Enochian angels. And in other dream encounters that Daniel Rection had, he encounters an alien being who calls himself Galathog the Grey. Galathog is one of the angels from the Sigillum Dei Aemeth. So at least for this practitioner, in this practitioner's experience, the angels are very much related to the UAP phenomenon. And in fact, Harold E. Puthoff, who was the director of one of these remote viewing projects to contact the UAP entities, was a Scientologist. So Scientology in turn comes from L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard got all of his best ideas from Jack Parsons, who practiced Enochian magic. And Enochian magic is very connected to these encounters with angelic entities in medieval times, which manifest in modern times as the UAP entities. So if I had to put everything together, all that information that I've unpacked, and determine what it is that Matthew Brown's trying to tell us in his X post, it can be distilled down to a few points. AI is nothing compared to how advanced UAPs are. The UAPs are more spiritual than technological. There is a history of intelligence agencies trying to contact transcendental beings. There is also a link between the UAP phenomenon and the occult. There's evidence to suggest the UAPs are the same thing as the angels of antiquity. Contact has been going on for millennia and could be the origin point of entire religions or spiritual traditions. And the big story when it comes to contact events is telepathic communication rather than the retrieval of technology. The UAP or angelic contact phenomenon also says a lot about our own potential as human beings and our ability to manipulate reality beyond this dimension. There's lots of allusions to gateways into other dimensions and a lot of apocalyptic overtones in what Brown is saying, particularly with reference to the angel aborymon. And really, I think what Matt Brown is alluding to here is the end of the black iron prison that is currently oppressing all of us and a mass awakening of humanity. And understanding the full history of our communication with these beings is a part of that process. But one sort of last bit of information I want to leave you with, or opinion I suppose, is that these beings, they're only intermediaries. And what they're pointing us towards really is the one that they serve, which is God. And, speaking to God is the original kind of contact with an extra-dimensional entity, the original and the best. And all the other forms that contact can happen pale in comparison to that, and ultimately must serve that to be something that helps in our evolution. And I think that that's where Matthew Brown was trying to point us, because in his weaponized interview, when the interviewers ask him, is there any last thing you want to tell people, knowing full well that his life might be on the line, the thing that he chooses to tell us is that there is a God, and to come to realize that fact. Not to worry about whether these beings exist, but that God exists. Ultimately, that is the thing that we need to discover or rediscover. And maybe that's why one of the last bits of this enigmatic X post of Matt Brown's refers to Jesus. But that is everything that I wanted to say to unpack Matt Brown's post. I will leave it there. There's more that I could say. So hopefully you've gained some insight into some of these ideas, some of these bits of knowledge that I think Matt Brown was trying to point us towards. And you understand the significance of aborymon and that symbol, and the significance of Enochian magic, really to the very foundations of Western civilization, if you look into it deeply enough. And that's all I have to say. If you like this subject matter, I would highly recommend going to the EnochiaCon conference. It's an entire conference just on Enochian magic. I'll leave a link in the description below in how you can register for that. And I'll leave a bunch of other links to other videos kind of elaborating on topics I've covered here tonight. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe to my channel to support my work, and if you want to support me further, hit join or thanks down below. But thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time.